With a civil war within the new leadership group born out of the toppling of the old regime, with mutual accusations of betrayal and collaboration with the imperialist enemy and the extensive activities of their intelligence services, dedicated both to the recruitment of agents as well as to subversion. It's in this context that we must place the events that in 1937 led to the prosecution and execution of Marshal Tukhachevsky and a number of other leading officers in the Red Army. There's a long history behind this case. Years earlier Lenin saw the Bonapartist danger threatening Soviet Russia and also expressed his concerns to Trotsky. Would civil authority really be able to subordinate military authority? In 1920, Tukhachevsky seems to have wanted to make the decision regarding the March on Warsaw, a dream of his. There clearly emerges, a leading historian from our time observes, the possibility of the brilliant general becoming the Bonaparte of the Bolshevik Revolution. 285 10 years later, Stalin is warned by the GPU about the schemes that are being forged by military elements opposed to him. Was there no cause for alarm? 286 In April of the following year, it was Trotsky who expresses his great doubts regarding Tukhachevsky, offering the following analysis of the situation created in the USSR after the political defeat of Bukharin and his allies on the right. The principal danger for socialism is represented not by Thermidorian reaction, which would formally conserve the country's Soviet character and the communist character of the ruling party, but by Bonapartist reaction, that will take the most open, most mature form of the counter-revolution, that will be waged against the Soviet system and the Bolshevik party as a whole, unsheathing the saber in the name of bourgeois property. In such a case, the most adventurous Praetorian elements like Tukhachevsky could play a role of great importance. Those opposing them with weapons in hand would be the revolutionary elements of the party, the state and, take note, the army, reunited around the working class and the Bolshevik-Leninist faction. 287 This stance constitutes a new factor in the conflict between the Bolsheviks. Despite having the armed forces under his control, Stalin was careful not to get them too closely involved in the controversies and intrigues that shook the party and the state. 288 Now, clearly, the opposition seeks to gain entry or to consolidate its presence in the army in the name of the struggle against the Bonapartist threat. After all, only it would be able to meaningfully oppose it. However, not allowing himself to be intimidated by this Bonapartist threat, in 1935 Stalin grants Tukhachevsky and 4 other military officers the title of Marshal. It's a promotion made in the context of a reform that sees the army abandon its predominantly territorial militia character, becoming a true standing army and restoring the old pre-revolutionary discipline. 289 On December 21 of the same year, together with other members at the apex of Soviet political and military leadership, the new Marshal celebrates Stalin's birthday at the latter's home until 5:30 in the morning. Dimitrov emphasizes. 290 It's precisely that reform which draws Trotsky's outrage, who, on the one hand, returns to the old denunciation. The Red Army was not spared in the Soviet regime's degeneration, on the contrary, that degeneration found in the army its highest expression. On the other hand, Trotsky takes on a new tone, mentioning the formation of a new kind of opposition faction in the army, which, from the left, laments the abandonment of the focus on world revolution. And the text cited here, it somewhat suggests that this opposition could have lured in Tukhachevsky himself, a man who in 1921 had fought with excessive zeal for the formation of a world high command could hardly have supported the abandonment of internationalism and the cult to the status quo that had taken hold in the USSR. What to say of this text? The agitation in the army continues and appears to be strengthening, only that now the approaching struggle doesn't oppose a Bolshevik-Leninist faction against the Bonapartist generals, but a reliable part of the army and its leadership against the Thermidorian leaders and traitors in the Kremlin. The resistance by the Red Army, and its rebellion against state power, would be further justified by the fact that its new political course constituted a double coup d'état that, in breaking with the Bolshevik October, arbitrarily proceeded to the elimination of the militias and the restoration of the officer caste. 18 years after its revolutionary suppression, 291 rising up against Stalin, the Red Army would have, in fact, prevented the coup d'états he was planning and would have re-established revolutionary legitimacy. As if all of that wasn't enough, the Trotskyist opposition bulletin announces an imminent revolt by the army. 292 Perhaps a measure taken in Moscow some months before the trials aimed to confront that possible threat. On March 29, 1937, the Politburo debated the removal from the Red Army of all commanders and officers who had been expelled from the party for political motives, transferring them to the economic ministries. 293 The rumors spread by White Russian exiles in Paris about a military coup d'état that was being prepared in Moscow fueled even more the climate of suspicion and concern. 294 Finally, during the latter half of January 1937, the Czechoslovakian president, Edvard Beneš, receives intelligence about the secret negotiations underway between the Third Reich and the anti-Stalinist clique in the USSR of Marshal Tukhachevsky, Rykov and others. 295 Was there some basis to the accusation, or was it all a setup by German intelligence services? Yet early on in 1937, in speaking with his foreign minister, Konstantin von Neurath, Hitler rejects the idea of an improvement in relations with the USSR, but adds, "It would be different if things in Moscow developed in the direction of an absolute despotism under the control of the military. In that case it would be wrong to miss the opportunity to make our presence felt again in Russia." 296 Beneš also keeps the French leaders up to date on those negotiations, thereby notably weakening confidence in the French-Soviet pact. 297 Therefore it wasn't Stalin alone who believed the information shared by the Czechoslovakian president. Moreover, even after the end of the Second World War, Churchill appears to confirm Moscow's version, stressing, as we will see, infra, ch. 7.2, that the purge struck the pro-German elements, adding, Stalin felt he owed a great deal of gratitude to President Beneš. 298 At any rate, the question remains without an answer, and to conclusively answer it only a private conversation of Hitler's in the summer of 1942 offers some assistance. Despite not mentioning a concrete military conspiracy, he observes that Stalin had serious reasons to fear being killed by Tukhachevsky's inner circle. 299 If it had all been a setup with Hitler's direct supervision or approval, 300 he would have perhaps boasted of it at a time in which the memories were still fresh of the initial and unstoppable advances by the Wehrmacht. In asking the key question about the then recent trials and executions, Trotsky gives an answer that raises more questions. It all depends on what one considers to be a conspiracy. Any sign of discontent and any contact made among those who are disgruntled, any criticism and any consideration about what to do, or how to oppose the government's shameful policies, all of this, from Stalin's point of view, is a conspiracy. It's a totalitarian regime. All opposition is undoubtedly the seed of a conspiracy. In that sense, the seed was the general's aspirations to protect the army from the demoralizing intrigues of the GPU. Is it his rejection of the conspiracy theory, or is it his corroboration of it, expressed in the Aesopian language imposed by circumstances? Who calls attention to that ambiguous declaration is the fervent Trotskyist and Russian historian we've already encountered, who ends up accepting the thesis of the anti-Stalinist conspiracy by Tukhachevsky, putting it in a Bolshevik political context rather than a bourgeois one. 301 To conclude, doubts remains, but it seems difficult to explain all that had happened with the usual deus ex machina, the power-hungry and bloodthirsty dictator, eager to surround himself with puppets, blind and unconditional in their loyalty. This explanation is all the more fragile for the fact that in 1932 Stalin had no issues in attending, together with Molotov, classes by the commandant of the military academy, Boris M. Shaposnikov, and Stalin gained a lot from these classes, given by a highly decorated strategist, yet who was not a member of the Communist Party. 302 Moreover, military science was one of the few politically important fields in which Stalin favored originality and innovation, to the extent that the officer corps could exercise considerable spiritual independence. 303 Taking the place of Tukhachevsky and his subordinates are generals who, far from being passive yes-men, frankly expressed their opinions and made arguments according to their own judgment. 304 Not hesitating to contradict the supreme leader, who, moreover, encourages and sometimes rewards that attitude. Supra, ch. 1, 6.